Have you ever faced injustice and found unexpected allies in your fight? Share your story. The school hallway buzzed with the chaotic energy of the midday rush, lockers slamming, voices melding into a relentless tide, sneakers scuffing the linoleum floor. Sunlight sliced through the tall windows, casting long, sharp-edged beams that illuminated particles of dust dancing in the stale air. Amara moved confidently beneath that golden glow, the vivid patterns of her jacket a bright testament to her heritage, individuality, and pride. Her wrist bore a delicate bracelet, woven with intricate beads, a gift from her grandmother, pulsing softly with personal history and courage. She glanced down at it, the warmth of its presence an unseen shield against the unseen battles ahead. The sound of laughter, sharp and taunting, sliced through the hum. It was Jessica's voice, an unmistakable, cruel melody that immediately tightened Amara's chest. Ahead, a group clustered near the lockers, Jessica at the center, her eyes sharp and predatory. The wall's cold, chipped paint served as a backdrop for unspoken warnings. Amara's footsteps slowed, uncertainty stalking her confidence. Then, as if timed to cruel perfection, Jessica's hand darted out, fingers snatching the bracelet from Amara's wrist with deft ease. "What's this?" Jessica taunted, holding the bracelet aloft like a trophy. The laughter from the group cascaded as a wave, drowning Amara in a sudden tide of humiliation. A little girl playing grown-up with her grandmother's trinkets? How precious! Amara's lips pressed into a thin line, pain flickering like a sudden storm behind her eyes. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat, thick, heavy with shame. Around her, the crowd closed in, their eyes sharp, some gleaming with disdain, others with uncomfortable sympathy. "Give it back," Amara whispered, voice barely audible above the din. Jessica's smirk deepened, a blade sharpened by privilege and malice. "Or what? You're nothing without this little thing. Maybe we should keep it, remind you where you really belong." The tension coiled tight as Amara stepped forward, head held high despite the sinking weight in her chest. Her gaze shifted through the eyes surrounding her, indifference, cruelty, judgment. The warm beams of sunlight that had embraced her seemed distant, replaced by the harsh glare of exposure and vulnerability. The bracelet connection to strength, identity, and family gleamed mockingly in Jessica's hand. Amara's fingers twitched, a silent plea for reclamation, justice, and dignity. The camera lingered on her face, flushed with humiliation but framed by eyes burning with quiet fire, a fire that dared to glow despite the darkness closing in. The hall echoed with footsteps, whispers, and the sting of isolation. And then, with a sudden motion, the group dispersed, laughter trailing behind them like smoke. Amara stood alone in the corridor, the bracelet lost to shadow but her spirit smoky and smoldering, waiting to ignite. The scene closed on the broken school fence, visible through a distant window, the jagged edges silhouetted against a cold sky, a stark symbol of fractured justice and the battles yet to come. The bathroom was cold, sterile, and suffused with the harsh white glare of flickering fluorescent lights. The sharp scent of bleach lingered in the air, blending with the muffled sounds of distant footsteps and low conversations fading down the empty hallways. Amara entered with hesitant steps, her chest tight, as if the breath could tear through the fragile veil of grief and humiliation that wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud. She closed the door slowly behind her, the click sounding impossibly loud in the confined space, sealing her away from the world outside, the world where her bracelet had been cruelly stripped from her wrist and her dignity trampled beneath the jeering feet of Jessica and her cronies. Amara sank against the cold tile wall, the chill seeping into her skin, numbing the sting of her shame. The mirror above the sink reflected back to her a face she barely recognized, eyes rimmed with tears, lips pressed tight as though to hold back the storm threatening to spill forth. Yet beneath the surface, something deeper stirred, an ember flaring within the hushed void. She traced the faint redness on her wrist where the bracelet once lay, a raw imprint that bore the invisible scars of humiliation and loss. Her fingers trembled as she flexed her hands, willing herself to grasp strength from the embers of that precious heritage, the legacy her grandmother had imbued within every bead and thread. The fluorescent hum seemed to pulse in tune with her racing heartbeat, filling the silent sanctuary with a mechanical cadence that underscored her isolation. The dampness clung, and a solitary tear escaped, trailing down her cheek, its silent descent a fragile testimony to pain endured but not surrendered. Her thoughts tangled in turmoil. Was she safe? Was she worthy? The veil of doubt threatened to smother the fragile sparks of hope. Yet, within the cold emptiness, a faint whisper pierced the silence, the promise of resilience etched deep in the legacy she bore, symbolized by the lost bracelet, a beacon yet to be reclaimed. A sudden commotion outside the bathroom broke the fragile cocoon of silence. A burst of laughter, sharp and cruel, led by Jessica's unmistakable voice. Amara stiffened, every nerve taut, the rawness of the wound becoming a galvanizing force rather than a shackle. Her breath deepened, slow and steady. The mirror bore witness to the transformation unfolding in her gaze, pain and hesitation giving way to fierce determination, the quiet rebellion that would not be silenced. The bracelet was gone, but the unyielding spirit it represented was rising within, an invisible armor forged in love and courage. As she rose from the cold floor, the camera lingered on her profile, shoulders squared, eyes burning with an indomitable fire. The bathroom, once a prison of despair, stood illuminated not by its harsh lights but by the soft, burgeoning glow of a spirit on the verge of awakening. The lingering shot framed the fading echoes of Jessica's laughter through the door, a stark contrast to the silence enveloping Amara as she stepped forward, ready now to meet the shadows lurking beyond, and to claim her fight for dignity anew. The cool tile beneath Amara's fingertips felt grounding, a cold but steady contrast to the whirlwind inside her chest. The harsh fluorescent lights above flickered uncertainly, casting jagged shadows that seemed to dance with the turmoil she fought to contain. The bathroom, a place that moments ago had offered a refuge from the chaos, now felt like a crucible where despair and resolve collided. Her breath came in ragged pulls as her gaze lifted slowly, settling on a splattered wall where vibrant graffiti cracked the sterile monotony. A phoenix, majestic and fierce, wings unfurled in mid-flight. Beneath it, the words stood clearly scrawled in bold strokes: Rise. The colors, fiery reds, molten golds, and dawn's softest hues, broke through the fluorescent glare, coaxing warmth into her frozen frame. Her eyes, shadowed with fatigue and shame, reflected the fierce bird's flame, faint yet undeniable. Something stirred, a whisper beneath the weight of humiliation, a flicker of life pushing through the cracks of despair. The bracelet had been stolen, but the spirit it symbolized pulsed with vibrant strength inside her. The silence around her tightened, every breath a staccato beat of uncertain hope. Amara's hand rose slowly, trembling but decisive, to the spot where the bracelet had settled, now an empty space that felt both like a loss and a challenge. Her fingers curled into a fist, the longing transforming into steely determination. Soft footsteps echoed from the corridor, hesitant and cautious, but she did not turn. The bathroom's harsh light softened in her gaze, warming into a golden amber as a quiet promise took root. Amara exhaled slowly, the air releasing the suffocating weight that had anchored her to shame. The phoenix on the wall, framed like a portal, seemed to burn brighter, its wings spreading wider, urging her to rise beyond the pain, beyond the injustice. The camera lingered on her profile, elongated by the light, the faint glow illuminating the contours of strength forged in silent battles. Her silhouette stood poised on the threshold between despair and courage. The broken school fence appeared briefly through a streaked window, its rusted, jagged edges shadowed beneath a cold gray sky, a stark reminder of the fractured justice she faced. Yet, even there, a single ray of sunlight broke through a cloud, glinting off a solitary wildflower blooming beside the iron bars. Amara's eyes sharpened with clarity. The reclaimed light in the darkness was her awakening, a call not to retreat but to fight. She turned firmly toward the door, the soft click of her resolve echoing louder than any taunt. The world beyond awaited, its challenges fierce but not insurmountable. With every step forward, the flame inside her kindled her grandmother's bracelet perhaps lost, but its spirit, the courage it represented, burned fiercely within. The scene concluded with her figure departing the bathroom sanctuary, framed by the rising tension of unseen battles, the promise of allies to be found, and the first true breath of revolution. The final image held the phoenix alight on the wall, wings spread wide, a vivid emblem of renewal and resilience, surging, pleading, commanding rise. The school hallways were a swirl of noise and motion, a chaotic tide washing over lockers slammed with pent-up frustration, and students' voices, a mingled river of laughter, rumors, and hushed secrets. The chatter seemed to pulse with both cruelty and misunderstanding, catching at Amara's fragile nerve endings as she moved cautiously through the crowd. Her chestnut curls framed a face etched with tentative resolve, vibrant patterns of her clothing a declaration of identity amidst conformity. The warm glow of afternoon sunlight spilled unevenly through the high windows, creating streaks of gold and shadow that fell like a spotlight upon Amara and the few students walking beside her, a small but resolute pack of marginalized peers she had begun to trust. Their footsteps were cautious but firm, soft whispers exchanged like fragile weapons hurling defiance at the unrelenting tide of dominance that was Jessica and her clique. Whispers of resistance had found small flames in the heart of the school's overlooked corners. A stolen notebook here, a shared lunch stolen from solitude, the retiny victories stitched together by courage into a fragile tapestry of defiance. Amara's heart beat faster, the lingering sting of the stolen bracelet still raw, yet beneath it, an emboldened spirit stirred. In a narrow corridor dimmed by fading sunlight and worn wall paint, Amara met Sophia, a quiet but sharp-witted classmate who had also suffered under Jessica's shadow. "We're stronger than they think," Sophia said quietly, her eyes flickering with cautious hope. "We have to stand together, or we'll be invisible forever." Amara nodded, the flicker of companionship calming the tempest swirling inside her. But beneath that fragile truce lay the sharp edge of fear of betrayal, of isolation, and the unknown cost of standing up. One afternoon, as rain pelted the windows in a steady, rhythmic drum, Amara found herself alone in the library, the worn spines of books her only company. A sudden whisper from the doorway startled her. It was Jamal, a determined soul who had watched her from afar, silently impressed by her courage despite the bullying. "I think I saw Jessica today, hidden behind the bleachers," he said, voice low, eyes searching hers for trust. "There's a plan. They want to isolate you, make an example out of you. We're not just fighting for the bracelet anymore. It's about standing up for all of us." Amara's breath hitched, the weight of the fight settling heavily on her young shoulders. "Then we have to be smarter," she murmured. "Stronger, too." Night fell like a silken drape over the town, shadows creeping past streetlights and homes. Yet inside Amara, a quiet revolution took root, a mixture of fear and fiery determination mingling with the warmth of newfound friendships. A distant siren wailed, intertwining with the rhythmic, distant thunder as the school clock ticked relentlessly onward. The camera held tight on Amara's trembling hand, reaching instinctively to the empty wrist that once wore her grandmother's bracelet, a symbol not lost, but transformed into an unyielding will. The final shot lingered on the horizon outside the classroom window, where dark clouds threatened a storm yet held a silver lining hinting at dawn, the promise of a battle far from over, the spark just beginning to blaze. As the screen faded to black, Amara's voice echoed softly, a whisper entwined with resolve. "This is just the beginning." The scene's breathless pause hung like a question unanswered, a cliffhanger pulsing with the promise of courage forged in struggle, alliances fragile yet unbreakable, and the faint glimmer of justice yet to come. Rain slicked the school windows, blurring the harsh fluorescent lights that cast long, ghostly shadows down the hallways. Amara's footsteps echoed softly as she moved through the corridors with quiet determination, the weight of yesterday's humiliation still heavy on her shoulders, yet beneath it, a growing ember of defiance flickered. The alliances she had begun to forge were fragile threads pulled tighter by fear and hope. In whispered meetings behind closed doors and in the dim glow of forgotten classrooms, Amara gathered a small fleet of marginalized students, quiet warriors ready to push back against the bullying that threatened to suffocate them all. Yet with every tentative victory came the sting of sacrifice. Trust, precious and brittle, had begun to fracture. One of her closest allies, Maya, whose fierce loyalty had buoyed Amara through the darkest moments, now stood distant and cold, her eyes clouded with doubts fed by whispered rumors and a hidden agenda Amara could barely grasp. It was during a tense exchange outside the library, beneath the flickering lights and the constant hum of school life, that betrayal grazed Amara like a cruel winter wind. Maya's words, cutting and unexpected, left Amara staggering. "You think you can change things? Sometimes, survival means playing their game. Don't make yourself a target you can't take down." Amara's response was quiet but resolute. "If I don't try, who will?" The look Maya cast was a mixture of sorrow and warning, a reflection of the peril entwining their fragile truce. Later, alone in a cramped corner of the cafeteria, Amara touched the empty space on her wrist where her grandmother's bracelet once glinted. The absence stung like a fresh wound, a symbol of stolen heritage and identity, yet also a call to arms. Around her, the laughter and chatter of others felt like waves crashing against a rocky shore, threatening to erode her resolve. Despite the uncertainty and the fear, the days brought small sparks of hope. A whispered tip about a secret meeting place where students shared their stories without fear, an anonymous note left in her locker promising solidarity, a resolved glance from a teacher who had seen more than she dared acknowledge openly. But the school's atmosphere thickened with tension. Rumors mutated into threats, whispered warnings shadowed every gesture. At a particularly fraught school assembly, Jessica's sharp gaze found Amara's, the malice in her eyes a stark reminder of the looming storm. The camera captured a close-up of Amara's clenched fists, the trembling beneath masked by steely calm. She was no longer just a victim, but a flickering flame in the gathering night. As the assembly room dissolved into a murmur of frustrated voices, the scene shifted to the dim corridor outside where Amara's phone buzzed, an encrypted message flashing briefly before vanishing. "Help is coming. But watch your back." Her breath hitched, uncertainty swirling with cautious hope as she pocketed the device. The bracelet, though lost, seemed to pulse in memory, a silent rallying cry. The final shot held on Amara's face, the storm of emotions contained behind eyes bright with fierce determination. The hallway stretched out before her, a labyrinth of danger and possibility, each step forward a defiant stride against the shadows. Fade to black with the lingering echo of her whispered vow, "I will rise, whatever it takes." The school corridor, usually a place of casual bustle and idle chatter, lay heavy with charged silence, a silence tinged with betrayal, and a betrayal that cut deeper than any spoken insult. Amara's footsteps echoed hollowly as she navigated the hallways, the walls closing in around her like cruel shadows. Her eyes, usually alight with courageous fire, were now clouded with shock and hurt, reflecting the storm of emotions brewing within. The betrayal had come unexpected, a whisper from a supposed friend, a confidant she had trusted in her fight against the bullies. The sting was immediate and raw, an emotional fracture that threatened to crack her spirit entirely. It was not the first venom she had faced, but it was the bitterest, for it came wrapped in the guise of alliance. Jessica loomed prominently at the end of the hall, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Yet this time, she was not alone. In her hand, she clutched a letter folded and worn, yet screaming with silent accusation. The letter had been uncovered from a hidden place, exposing her manipulations for all to see. It detailed racist motives, carefully veiled behind layers of social superiority and disdain. The tension was palpable as the letter was leaked gradually among the student body, whispers swelling into murmurs, murmurs into murmured outrage. But the cost was dear. Amara's circle of trust fractured further, alliances shattered by suspicion and fear. The path to justice now twisted through thorns of uncertainty and loneliness. In the quiet of the library, Amara sat clutching the worn note from her grandmother, the bracelet's spirit echoing in every bead she could no longer wear. It symbolized her heritage, courage, and the resilience she desperately sought to embody. Why betray what we fight for? Her voice cracked softly into the still air, an aching whisper of confusion and heartbreak. Her closest ally, eyes filled with regret, replied in a voice thick with reluctance, "Some fears run deeper than justice, and some bonds are broken before they can be mended." The emotional weight pressed upon Amara as she grappled with the realization that the fight was bigger than any single person. The battle was not just against overt hostility but also the quiet fractures that threatened to consume her from within. Later, beneath a cold streetlight, she found herself staring at the broken school fence, a tangible symbol of the fractured justice she sought to mend. The twisted metal and splintered wood reflected the broken trust and shattered hopes encasing the community. Yet within this darkness, a distant flicker of light appeared, a whispered promise of allies hidden in plain sight, anonymous messages that spoke of solidarity whispered in shadows, a bracelet mysteriously returned to its rightful place. Amara's clenched fist relaxed slightly as a breath of cautious hope mingled with the cold night air. The phoenix she once saw in the bathroom was no longer a solitary symbol but a chorus rising from the ashes, movement of many fueled by courage, fear, and a relentless desire for justice. Her voice, steady yet vulnerable, floated softly into the night. "The fight is far from over, but I will rise. We will rise." The camera lingered on her silhouette, framed by fractured light, a portrait of resilience poised between despair and the dawn of unstoppable resolve. As the scene faded, the distant gavel of the courtroom echoed, a relentless heartbeat promising accountability, justice, and the promise of change that would soon shake the very foundations of their world. The harsh clang of the school doors echoed behind Amara as she stepped into the empty hallway, her world collapsing with every fading footstep of those who once stood beside her. The bright, vibrant patterns of her clothes now seemed swallowed by the suffocating gray walls and cold linoleum beneath her feet. The vibrant colors that once mirrored her spirit felt drained, washed away by betrayal's poison. Her confidant, the one she trusted beyond all else, was expelled today, branded a traitor by the very system they had tried to change together. Whispers and sideways glances followed her in a suffocating wave, each one etching cracks deeper into her fragile hope. She felt the sting of isolation like a cold wind clawing at her skin. In the vast emptiness of the school, she was a solitary flame flickering against an unforgiving storm. Rain hammered relentless outside, streaking cold against the windows, mirroring the tempest tearing through her insides. The classroom's overhead lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and distort, swallowing the once familiar space into darkness. The broken school fence outside, visible through the rain's streaked glass, stood jagged and splintered, a stark emblem of fractured protection, of trust shattered and justice denied. Amara's chest tightened, her grip on the invisible thread tethering her to dignity slackening as despair seeped into her bones. Where once she'd drawn strength from alliances and solidarity, she now found only silence and cold wounds that ran deeper than scraped skin. The loss of her closest ally was more than a betrayal, it was an erasure, a violent severing of the last remaining lifeline in the swirling chaos. She sank onto the edge of a desk, the rough wood unforgiving beneath her fingers as she clutched the empty wrist that had once bore her grandmother's bracelet, gone, stolen, vanished in the tide of cruelty that threatened to erase her entire identity. The weight of the lost piece was heavier than metal or beads. It was the weight of culture, love, and belonging, now a hollow space that echoed with absence. Her whispered breath trembled with fractured defiance. "Is this the end?" The silence answered only with the cold flicker of broken bulbs and the distant, monotonous hum of the school's air vents, a sterile requiem for the collapse of her courage. Memories surged, unbidden faces twisted with disdain, voices ridiculing the heritage she wore like invisible armor, the moments when justice had slipped from her grasp like water through clenched fists. Time itself seemed to stagger as Amara's gaze landed on the cracked windowpane, the blurry world outside distorted by rain. In that deformed reflection, her own eyes stared back heavy, uncertain, yet flickering with a shadow of something unquenched. The camera closed in slowly on her clenched jaw, the subtle curve of determination battling despair beneath her skin. The broken school fence loomed outside like a silent specter, a metaphor for the justice system ravaged by bias and neglect, a barrier to safety and equality that had fractured her spirit but not yet broken it entirely. As the screen dimmed, the last trace of sunlight bled from the sky, leaving Amara alone in the encroaching darkness, her soul poised on the brink of collapse, a fragile note in an unfinished song of courage and justice. The cold walls of the empty school corridor seemed to close in around Amara, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, casting long, wavering shadows that stretched like fingers across the dull floor tiles. The air was thick with stillness, broken only by the faint, distant echoes of footsteps fading into silence. Each sound seemed amplified in the suffocating quiet, reverberating against the bare walls and deepening the cavernous solitude that engulfed her. Amara stood motionless, her vibrant clothing muted by the sterile glare, her shoulders slumped beneath the weight of loss that pressed heavy against her chest. Gone was the spark of defiance that once danced in her gaze. Instead, her eyes were glassy, distant, reflecting the fractured pieces of her world shattered by betrayal and abandonment. Her fingers absent-mindedly traced the cold surface of the empty space where her grandmother's bracelet used to rest, a symbol once gleaming with heritage and defiance, now a hollow absence at her wrist. The emptiness felt cavernous, a gaping chasm echoing the profound void settling within her. Rain began to pummel the cracked windows nearby, the rhythmic drumming a mournful hymn underscoring the crushing silence. The broken school fence beyond the glass twisted jaggedly into the gray sky, a stark emblem of the fractured justice system they all navigated, a system that had failed her, leaving her exposed and alone. As a soft gust stirred loose papers on the floor, Amara's breath caught, the cool air ghosting across her skin like a whispered reminder of battles lost. Her lips parted slightly, releasing a breathless question, a fragile plea swallowed by the cavernous stillness. Is there any justice left for me? The corridor absorbed her voice, returning only its own hollow echo. Her gaze drifted to a distant lock on a nearby classroom door, locked, impenetrable, a mirror to the barriers close around her spirit. Each tick of the clock above punctuated the stillness, a relentless reminder of time slipping away, of hope dwindling to a faint and dying ember. She sank slowly to the floor, knees drawn up, head bowed beneath the harsh glare. The silence wrapped tighter around her, pressing down into the darkest corners of her mind where despair had taken root, a shadow enveloping any flicker of light. There, amid the shadows, a single shard of graffiti caught her eye, a faint phoenix etched in chipped paint on a far wall, its wings outstretched upward but hue faded, crumbling, like hope eroding under relentless storm. Its likeness fractured under peeling layers, a poignant symbol of resilience teetering on the verge of collapse. The camera lingered on Amara's profile, her features softened by tears, the tension in her shoulders unraveling into stillness. The bracelet's memory flickered faintly, an ember barely breathing beneath the ashes. Outside, the relentless rain beat against the windows, the patter a soft dirge to solitude, each drop a note in an elegy for innocence lost. The broken fence swayed weakly in the storm, a muted testament to fractures beyond repair. In the profound silence, Amara exhaled, a shaky breath fragmented into the void, a whisper swallowed by darkness. And there, suspended between light and shadow, strength and surrender, the scene faded into a lingering hush, the weight of despair threading through every moment, their brokenness a mirror to a world still awaiting its reckoning. The cold silence of Amara's bedroom wrapped around her like a suffocating shroud, yet beneath the heavy quiet a faint whisper of resilience stirred. Moonlight spilled through the cracked blinds, casting silver slats across her face as she lay curled on the floor, the barren space around her a mirror to the emptiness she felt inside. Her fingers brushed lightly against the worn wooden floor, searching for a lifeline amidst the shadows. Then, beneath her trembling hand, she felt the delicate edge of paper, a note, folded small and nearly invisible against the dust. With painstaking care, she unfolded the message, the crumpled paper bearing a single word scrawled in hurried ink: "Rise." The word echoed the phoenix graffiti she had once seen in the school bathroom, a symbol that had stirred her from despair before. The room seemed to hold its breath as that small scrap of hope whispered of possibility, of courage not yet extinguished. Her eyes filled with tears, not just of sorrow, but of fragile awakening. The necklace her grandmother had given her, long lost but never forgotten, seemed to pulse faintly in her memory, a beacon of heritage and strength tethered to love and defiance. Slowly, she rose to her knees, then to her feet. The weight of despair began to lift, replaced by a quiet determination. The broken school fence outside her window caught the moonlight, its jagged silhouette no longer just a symbol of fractured justice but a challenge, a barrier to be crossed. Amara's breath came steady now, her voice a whisper charging the air: "I will rise." The camera lingered on her face, bathed in the cold, silver light, yet fiery with new resolve. The flickering shadows gave way to glimmers of unyielding spirit, a silent promise forged in suffering yet unbroken. In the stillness, the distant rustle of leaves and the faint crackle of a lighter flicked on in the unseen world, small sparks bursting quietly against the cold night, foreshadowing the blaze of change yet to come. The scene closed on the rising moon, serene yet powerful, illuminating the path from despair to courage, casting its pale light over a girl on the cusp of transformation. In the dim early morning light filtering through narrowing cracks in the classroom blinds, Amara sat alone on the edge of her desk, her hands trembling gently as she clutched the worn fabric of her bracelet, a symbol of her heritage and burgeoning courage. Outside, the first rays of dawn painted faint streaks of gold across the broken fence visible through the window, a haunting reminder of the fractured justice system that had once seemed impenetrable. The room was still, save for the distant hum of the waking school, yet within Amara, a storm of conflicting emotions raged: longing, hope, fear, and the silent flicker of a flame reignited after being nearly extinguished. Her gaze lingered on the bracelet, now slightly loose on her wrist from the tumult of yesterday's chaos. Its beads, vibrant and intricate, caught the slivers of dawnlight, casting tiny rainbows across her face. She drew a slow breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The journey she had endured had been arduous, a relentless climb from humiliation and despair toward something unfamiliar, yet undeniably real, a sense of possibility. Despite the scars of betrayal and the weight of systemic injustice, a tiny but persistent voice inside whispered that her fight was not futile. Her mind drifted to the fragment of hope she'd clung to, the anonymous note she'd discovered among her books, promising that help was coming. The words, faint yet resolute, had rekindled in her a flicker of belief, stirring courage where despair had once taken root. As she touched the bracelet again, her fingers traced each bead with reverence and quiet resolve. The warm glow of the sun's first touch on her face contrasted starkly with the cold memories of past humiliations, her public shame, the stolen bracelet, the fractured trust. Yet today, she felt a different kind of illumination, not from the waning light but from within. In the stillness, she remembered her history teacher's words from yesterday's conversation, remarks about resilience, systemic change, and the quiet strength of individuals who refuse to be beaten by injustice. That quiet conversation had ignited a spark, a subtle but powerful recognition that her voice, however fragile, held the potential for transformation. With tentative yet deliberate intent, Amara stood and looked toward the window. The broken fence, now bathed in the gentle morning glow, almost beckoned her to step beyond the confines of fear and silence. Her reflection in the glass was a subtle mirror of her journey, an evolving spirit waiting in the wings of dawn's promise. A deep, steadying breath escaped her lips. She was not yet at the summit, and the battle was far from over, but she had found her footing in this fragile moment of awakening. Today was a beginning, a small yet resolute step toward justice and self-acceptance. The camera lingered on her figure framed by the dawn's warmth, capturing that delicate balance between vulnerability and emerging strength. Her eyes shimmered with new purpose as she prepared to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that even in shadows, a spark of hope might just ignite a dawn of lasting change. The auditorium was thick with anticipation, the air hanging heavy with the weight of truth and unspoken fears. Amara stepped onto the stage with a calm resolve that seemed to cut through beneath her vibrant, patterned jacket. The spotlight threw her figure into sharp relief, a silhouette powered by quiet confidence that belied her age. Her voice, steady and clear, pierced through the tense silence. "Today, I stand not just as a student who was once silenced but as a voice for justice, for dignity, and for change." The room hushed, eyes widening in disbelief. Behind the podium, Jessica's sneer faded into a flicker of panic, her manipulation unraveling before the watchful eyes of the assembly. Amara's words flowed with conviction, exposing systemic abuses, unfair practices, and systemic racism that had festered beneath the surface of their school's veneer. "We have tolerated silence too long," she said. "Our school's broken fences, symbolic of broken justice, must be repaired. Not by ignoring our faults but by confronting them head-on." She pulled from her backpack a folded piece of paper, the detailed notes she'd gathered, the hidden truths she'd uncovered, each word a dagger striking silence and complacency. Her eyes met the crowd's fear, doubt, and hope tangled in their expressions, yet within her, a spark of illumination ignited. Amara's voice grew confident, unwavering. "I call for truth, accountability, and a future where justice is not just an ideal but a lived reality for every student." There was a beat of silence before applause began, slow at first, then swelling with genuine conviction. Tears shimmered in Amara's eyes, not of despair but of emergence, her fight now a beacon, her courage a lighthouse guiding others out of the shadows. The scene shifted to the boardroom, where head teachers and district officials watched, stunned by her clarity and bravery. Their expressions softened, a stark contrast to the cold, harsh moments earlier. Amara's words had struck a chord, igniting a desire for real change. In a moment of silent acknowledgement, Amara gazed upward, her posture uplifted by the truth she carried and the hope she kindled. The broken fence outside the window now looked less like a symbol of ruin and more like a barrier ready to be dismantled. As she stepped down from the stage, the camera lingered, capturing her silhouette bathed in the radiant glow of purpose. The light seemed to pour from within her, an inner dawn that promised even greater battles ahead but ignited with a newfound strength. The scene closed on her face, calm, determined, a shining testament that courage, once awakened, is unstoppable. Her footfalls echoed in the hallways, each step a declaration that the fight for justice was only beginning and she was ready to lead it. The grand hall was bathed in an intense, yet warm glow, an eclipse of darkness giving way to emerging light. Amara stepped confidently onto the stage, her vibrant patterned jacket catching the bright lights, a symbol of her courage and cultural pride. Each step resonated with purpose, echoing a transformation that had been a long coming, a quiet rebellion that had gradually roared into a resounding call for justice. The audience, a sea of faces from supportive teachers to wary classmates, paused in breathless anticipation. Amara's eyes, once filled with doubts, now shone with unshakable resolve, luminous and steady. Her voice, clear and unwavering, filled the space as she addressed her peers, her words cutting through the lingering shadows of suppression. "Today, I stand here not just as an individual but as a voice for what's right. We have been divided by systemic injustice for too long, and today we have the chance to change that by trusting each other, by embracing our differences, by standing united." Her gaze swept the room, catching Jessica's shadowed glare, but now, it was a look of apprehension rather than dominance. Amara held her ground, the bracelet given by her grandmother gleaming gently on her wrist, their silent emblem of resilience, pride, and heritage. That bracelet had once been her symbol of vulnerability, but now it was her badge of unbreakable spirit. She reached into her bag and pulled out a carefully prepared speech, but her voice rose above the pages, passionate, rooted in truth, unyielding. We have the power to forge a future where justice is not just a word but a reality. I refuse to be silenced by prejudice or fear. We owe it to ourselves and to those who came before us to be brave enough to challenge injustice, even when the darkness seems overwhelming. Light poured through the windows, illuminating her figure as if the very universe echoed her cala radiant symbol of change. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the fire behind her eyes, the gentle strength in her posture. She was no longer a broken girl but a phoenix reborn. As applause erupted deep and genuine, the shadows that once concealed the broken fence outside seemed to recede. Hope ignited, radiant and fierce, in every heart present. Her words, her resolve, had begun to dismantle the barriers of indifference and fear. The scene slowly pulled back, framing her standing tall amidst the rising swell of voices, a figure embodying justice and courage. The world was far from perfect, but this moment marked its awakening, her transformation from victim to leader, from silence to voice. The room shimmered, alive with possibility, an echo of the Phoenix graffiti, now soaring higher than ever before. And as the camera lingered on her triumphant expression, the tangible warmth of hope filled the scene, a promise that even amidst darkness, the light of conviction and love would forever prevail. Beneath the tranquil glow of an early dawn, Amara stood quietly on the school's front steps, her eyes closed, feeling the gentle caress of the breeze mingling with the distant sounds of life awakening around her. Her grandmother's bracelet, a delicate beacon of heritage and resilience, gleamed softly in the sunlight, each bead shimmering with stories of struggle and strength. The sky above was a canvas of soft pinks and golds, a gentle promise of hope and renewal. Her fingertips brushed against the bracelet absent-mindedly, instinctively aware of the journey it symbolized, a journey from humiliation to empowerment, from silence to voice. The painful days of betrayal, doubt, and fear had carved deep scars, yet through each tear and trembling, a quiet wisdom had taken root. That change begins with inner acceptance. Amara's shoulders relaxed as she took a deep breath, filling her lungs with crisp, morning air. In this moment, she realized that her fight was no longer just against injustice but also for herself, to reclaim her dignity, her culture, her community. Every scar, every whisper of doubt, had forged a resilient core that now pulsed with unshakable purpose. The bruised but unbroken phoenix of her spirit stretched its wings in silent defiance. Looking out across the schoolyard, she saw the first students arriving, their faces alight with curiosity and hope, mirrors of her own awakening. The broken fence, the symbol of fractured justice, stood quietly in the wind, no longer a barrier but a testament to healing. Her gaze settled on her wrist, the bracelet gleaming proudly in the sunlight, a crown of courage and heritage. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not for a victory achieved but for the journey itself, which had transformed her into a beacon of hope for others. This was the dawn of a new chapter, not just in her story but in the collective narrative of her community, an awakening that refused to be silenced. As she took a final, soft step forward, her figure became a silhouette against the rising sun, a symbol of resilience, enduring hope, and the unbreakable bond of identity and love. The camera lingered, capturing her quiet presence, a gentle pause before the next steps of her journey, a visual hymn to the peace she had fought so fiercely to attain. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow across the gathered crowd where Amara stood atop the school's front steps. Her heartbeat slowed, each pulse reverberating with a profound sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. Her grandmother's bracelet, gleaming with a muted light, encircled her wrist, an enduring symbol of resilience, heritage, and the journey she traveled from pain to power. All around, the world seemed to pause. The whispers of students, teachers, and community members waned into a gentle murmur, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath in awe of her transformation. Her eyes shimmered with the depth of moments lived and lessons learned, her scars, once raw and bleeding, now softly tender, woven into the fabric of her spirit. As she took a slow step forward, Her movement was unforced, embodying a quiet confidence that radiated outward. The layered patterns of her clothes fluttered subtly in the breeze, mirroring the intricate tapestry of her identity, vibrant, unbreakable, and full of purpose. Every glance exchanged was no longer a contest of dominance but a silent acknowledgement of growth, shared humanity, and hope. Behind her, the broken fence of fractured justice stood resilient in the twilight, a monument to the battles fought and the barriers dismantled. The distant sounds of the city blended into a calming symphony, an ode to the relentless march toward equality. The past shadows, once looming like dark specters, dissipated into the evening air, replaced by a gentle dawn of new beginnings. In her heart, warmth blossomed, an epiphany rooted in forgiveness and understanding. She saw her enemies not as adversaries but as part of a larger collective awakening. Jessica's shadow still lingered, but her influence waned, overtaken by the luminous power of truth and courage. Amara's lips curled into a subtle smile, an offering of peace to herself and to the world. Her outstretched hand, calm and open, was a testament to her journey, the unbreakable strength forged through hardship, the courage to forgive, and the resolve to continue inspiring change. She looked upward, her gaze tracing the first constellations emerging in the dusky sky, a galaxy of possibilities, sparkling with hope. Her spirit intertwined with the universe's silent promise, embracing the infinite dance of light and shadow, growth and renewal. And as she finally turned, her silhouette framed against the glowing horizon, the scene softly fading into a cinematic tableau, a still shot of resilience, a pause in the ongoing story of pursuit and peace, eternal in its silence and grace. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the assembly gathered in the school's expansive courtyard. Amara stood at the podium, her shoulders relaxed yet radiating strength, the bracelet her grandmother had given her catching the soft light. It gleamed softly against the fabric of her vibrant dress, a symbol of her journey, her resilience, her heritage, her defiance. Fingering the bracelet gently, she looked out at the sea of face spears, teachers, community members, each one a witness to her evolution. Her voice, calm and unwavering, resonated with conviction. This journey was never just about me. It was about all of us. About breaking barriers, standing up against injustice, and choosing love over hatred. Her words, simple yet profound, floated in the air like a gentle melody, uniting a community that once fractured in fear and prejudice. The breaking fence, once a symbol of division, stood silently in the distance, a testament to barriers broken, not just physically but within hearts and minds. Amara's eyes shimmered with tears, not of sorrow but of profound peace. Her fierce fight from humiliation to hope, from despair to determination, had forged a bond that transcended words. Her fellow students, inspired by her courage, took her hand, symbolizing unity. Classmates who had once turned away now looked at her with respect, their faces reflecting understanding and change. The sunrise touched the horizon, casting long, luminous rays that seemed to ignite the sky with promise. The world was still imperfect, but this moment, this pause, marked the beginning of true healing. Her grandmother's bracelet, now more than jewelry, was a beacon, a living testament that resilience and love could indeed transform the broken fences of injustice. Amara stepped back, her heart swelling with quiet gratitude. She felt the gentle warmth of life around her, the breeze, the sunlight, the collective heartbeat of a community awakening to its potential for justice and compassion. The camera rose slowly, capturing her silhouette against the dawn, an eternal symbol of hope, resilient and radiant. The scene faded into a cinematic still, her figure steadfast, the bracelet shimmering in the morning light, a silent promise of peace and enduring change. What inner strength do you hold? Share your thoughts below.